recording. Seeing some numbers start to jump in here. We're gonna just give this a minute to allow for everyone to hop on here with us.
Yeah.
So fun to watch that number tick up. Tick, tick. All right.
Everyone's getting in.
Yes, they are. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Happy Sunday to you. Give us about another 30 seconds here, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you for attending today's town hall. My name is Megan Goebel. I'm the founder of Unity Conejo, and today's town hall is dispelling the myths of gender education for grades TK through 5. If you follow us on social media, you already know about our YouTube channel, which we just started recently. It's home to the recordings of our last 2 town halls, and as well as our new series titled LGBT+ Joy is Real. Today you will hear and see vocabulary that may seem overwhelming. However, please know that you'll receive a glossary of these terms at the end of the webinar. Once it's ready and it's ready to be uploaded to our YouTube, we'll go ahead and send you a glossary of terms and some other information as well. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Some of you have submitted questions already prior to today's town hall, and we will answer as many of those as we can, time allowing. If at any time during the panel you have a question or a comment you would like to make, please do so in the Q&A chat box below. Please be mindful that these questions they're coming straight to me, so no one else will see them. If you want, you can choose to send those questions and or comments through anonymously. There's a checkbox there, so feel free to use that. If we run out of time and can't answer all of the questions that may be submitted during the webinar, we will send out answers to those along with the glossary of terms that we will send later this week. So, also please note this is being recorded, obviously. That said, I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Let's see. So this is a handout, as we said, that's going to come soon. You can look for it after the webinar. So again, my name is Megan Goebel. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder of Unity Conejo, and I am the mother of 2 girls here in CVUSD. My oldest is 10. She's a 4th grader. She's cisgender. And my 6-year-old is a 1st grader, and she is transgender, which is what made me want to start up this organization. And it's been really wonderful so far. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over here to Dr. Adria Taha-Resnick, and I'm going to have her introduce herself, and we'll go from there.
Well, hi, Megan. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm Dr. Adria Taha-Resnick. I teach early childhood studies, and my specialty is understanding brain development of children 0 through 8, and then up to 12, but mostly up to 8. This is near and dear to my heart. I know it doesn't say it on my Zoom name because my name is so long. My she, her doesn't equal, have enough space on that. So I am a cisgender Arab American. My pronouns are she, her. I've dedicated my entire life to education and the idea that education is inclusive of all children. And so it's my honor to be here and be talking about the myths of gender education. So Finn?
Yes. Hi, I'm Finn. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I'm a sophomore. I've known I was queer since probably somewhere in 5th grade, but I sort of only worked out that I was trans in early 7th or late 6th grade. I've grown up really passionate about activism, and so I'm super excited to be here today.
Yeah. All right. Before we get started into the content of all of this, we would like to start our meeting with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of Ventura County, which is home to several tribal nations. As we begin this meeting, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. So we take a moment to honor these ancestral lands. My house is in Newbury Park, where I am sitting, which is the unceded land of the Chumash. Thank you. All right, so moving right along, we are going to start with some common vocabulary. In our previous town hall meetings, we have always done kind of an overview of terms that are used. Again, I think that that's really important as we start this conversation. What we need to understand is these particular terms are relevant to the conversation that we are having today. It's not that there's a set of beliefs that belong with these vocabulary words and this terminology. It is known that we agree on these terms going forward. So we are just going to kind of go through, I think, Megan, the next one is our understanding and agreement. There we go. Okay, so assigned sex at birth is often ASAB, the sex, male or female, assigned a child at birth based on the child's external genitalia. So we're just going to kind of go through these fairly quick so that we all have a sense of what we are talking about. Biological sex, how someone identifies their sex, and it is reflected on regulatory documents, like their biological sex may be on the same or maybe the same or different from their ASAB, but it's usually what's written on their birth certificate or a passport. Sexual orientation, a person's feelings of attraction, emotional, psychological, physical, and or sexual towards other people. Gender binary, the idea that gender is strictly an either or option of either male, men, masculine, or female, woman, feminine, based on their assigned sex at birth. Gender non-binary, a continuum or the spectrum of gender identities and expressions that are often based on the rejection of the gender binary dichotomy. Cisgender, a person whose gender identity is congruent with or matches the sex that they were assigned at birth. Cishet, a person who identifies as the gender they were assigned at birth and are attracted to the people of the opposite gender. Gender identity, a person's internal sense of being a man, male, or woman, female, both, neither, or another gender. Gender expression, a person's outward gender presentation, such as their personal style, their clothing, hairstyle, makeup, jewelry, vocal inflection, and body language. Gender non-conforming, a person whose gender expression is perceived as being inconsistent with the cultural norms expected for that gender. Transgender, adjective used to describe a person whose gender identity is incongruent with the sex they were assigned at birth. Social transition, a transgender person's process of creating a life that is congruent with their gender identity. This is not medical procedures at all. Gender fluid, a person whose gender identity is not fixed. Queer, umbrella term used by some to describe people who think of their sexual orientation or gender identity as outside of societal norms. All right, so moving right along with this slide. This is one of those amazing slides. It really does show how X and Y develop. So when we look at this slide, we see that it's extremely confusing, really. There's so many different lines. There's the spectrum that goes in the, from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other. So from very, very male heavy to the female heavy, and everything in between is where all of the chromosomes, hormones, and the genetics play a role in how someone's gender is determined. So you can see how, I know that this is kind of tough, but on the very left part where it has the chromosomes, the genes, the hormones, these are things that are happening at conception, and the weight of an X and the weight of a Y are not always evenly distributed, therefore giving every person a variation within their genes with everything. and that is not different when it comes to gender. So you can see actually how intensely confusing this can be. I'm not a geneticist, but I listen to the scientists who studied genetics and say, these are all the ways that gender is determined. So really this slide is to show how many variations there are that we just really don't have any idea, right? And it's not just X and XY. So I just like that slide to kind of show everybody what it means to really understand the variation in the spectrum of gender, and to understand that it is not binary scientifically. Okay. We're going to move on to our myths. And our first myth is that gender education is the same as sex education. And I think that a lot of us, when we had grown up or we were going through school, these classes were coined sex education. That's not what's done anymore. And gender education is not the same as sex education. Historically, this terms sex and gender have been used interchangeably. So it's common that people put the two topics together and think that they mean the same thing, or when they are speaking that we assume that it means the same thing. But their uses really are distinct. And it's really important to understand that in the context that we are talking about younger children, TK through 5, the health education and sexual health content is really more about naming functions of the body, understanding your senses, understanding good hygiene, those same things of nutrition, health, getting exercise, the ways that we take care of our bodies, and showing respect for others regardless of differences in physical development. And so everyone has differences within their gender development, so it's also showing a respect for that. The same that we would also be teaching children to have respect and understanding body diversity. So not everyone is shaped the same way either, just everybody's born different. And so this is how we kind of learn about how all of that works with our peers when we're with young children. So it's not until later, in 5th grade, children are taught a little bit more about puberty, their changing bodies, a little bit more about the reproductive system. And then as they go on to middle school is where more of the sexual health ideas come into play. But in TK through 5, we are in no way discussing sex as an act at all. There is none of that within the health content standards. Any of the organizations that have already put together a lot of lessons about these things and things that are going to be going out to the classrooms through the teachers is, taken all together and having an appreciation and understanding that all people are who should be able to be who they are. So just as a reaffirmation is that in TK through 5, it's not about sex at all. So in that sense, so hopefully that dispels that myth. All right. All right. Next myth is that children are too young to understand gender and gender-related topics. So I think that this one is particularly of interest for me. And that's because I've spent so much of my life studying young children. And it's one of those things where we just really don't often give them credit to understand how absolutely smart they are and what they are absorbing that is around them. So you can see here that we've got gender identity development that starts from day 1. So when we have, even before babies are born now, it's gender reveal and are they going to wear pink? Are they going to wear blue? And so they come into a world of a social construct of gender. They are not born into the world of thinking they're supposed to wear blue or pink or fit into any box in particular that society thinks they're supposed to fit into. So a lot of this is the exposure from the adults around them, which then goes into when they get a little bit older. All right, so in our next phase, which is more toddlerhood, going up to almost preschool time. Thank you. Children begin to define gender where they can look at other people and say, you're a boy, you're a girl, And that again comes from what they've been told in their life of this is what girls do, this is what boys do. Girls have long hair, boys have short hair. So they begin to identify and put people into those categories as well. At this point, children gain their sense of self. So once they get up to about 18 months old, when they realize that they're their own person, that is when they start to understand that they can identify themselves in certain ways. And gender just tends to be one of the main ones that they categorize themselves by, because a lot of people around them do that as well. You know, parents or teachers try to say, you know, play with this person or that person because you're both boys or you're both girls. So they're really put into these confines. And it's not particularly that they feel that they belong in one of those, but they put themselves in that anyway, because it gives them that sense of belonging.
And jump in and just add one thing in there too, because I think it's really important to notate that this is kind of the way that it's been for forever, as far as I know. You know, when you're talking about physical education or the classrooms, you know, all the boys sit on this side, all the girls sit on this side. And that automatically starts to create that gender binary for the two sides that, you know, well, why can't I sit over there with those boys? Why can't I sit over there with those girls? It's the same thing currently with how we have our human growth and development videos. You know, we have to separate them by boys and girls, but we don't. Best practice, excuse me, best practice shows us that actually having both boys and girls together in the same room to watch those videos is more beneficial. You know, especially in the case Finn, and then for my daughter as well, you know, being transgender, you can't sit in one of those two classrooms, you have to opt out. And that's unfortunate. So to have that understanding and figure, you know, ways to do that, I think is important to bring up too.
Absolutely. And to add to that too, that in that preschool age and by the age of 4, gender identity is pretty stuck. Children feel and know who they are. Whether or not they express it to those around them is an entirely different thing, right? But by age 4, our gender identity is pretty established. But it's also at this time that stereotyping really sets into a child's brain. And unless it's challenged, they'll try and fit into those stereotypical boxes because they don't have the understanding yet of saying, I think I'm not in one of these boxes, but everyone says I'm supposed to be in a box, and I'm only 4, so I don't have the ability to articulate that to the people around me. And so that is where not having these types of discussions about what the adults can do in children's lives and in classrooms and as parents really makes a difference, because they're only, by the time they're 4, they're still so little. But
yeah, I can totally, like, that's definitely what I went through personally, because looking back now at a lot of things in my childhood, I can be like, oh, but you know, at the time I thought everything I was feeling was normal. And I had my own internal sense of gender, but I had no idea the words for it. I had no idea what the difference between gender expression and gender was. And I didn't know it wasn't normal to like feel dread when you were being split up into boys or girls, or being told not to play with boys, which part of that is just, you know, stupid stereotypes. But a lot of times it's that kids don't have words. And, you know, not every time, even giving kids words for what they're feeling, they're not always going to use them. They're not always going to understand yet. And that's okay, because everyone experiences things differently. But what it really comes down to is just when we aren't giving them information, that's where the confusion is. They aren't too young to understand. They just don't have the proper information.
Oh, I think we're frozen. There, I think you're coming back. The day and age of modern technology and how we handle these things. That's okay. I think too, I'm just gonna add, oh, do you wanna go ahead and jump back in?
Next slide.
Next slide, okay. You don't wanna go through these last two?
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Am I good?
Yep.
Lastly, I just wanted to hit the school age where children have really understood the rigid thinking about gender roles, that there are firm rules in place that they are supposed to follow. And if they feel differently, that there is an awareness that they are different, and that may mean things to other people, and that there really is an understanding that they're challenging a structure. They're not sure what that means or how big the structure is and what it entails, but they know that, you know, there might be something different, and they may be scared to then challenge that structure. So we need to be aware that giving them all of the ideas, giving them the education, giving them the words, all of those things is what's going to help them talk to the people around them when they have feelings inside of them that they need to express. And then with any and all topics that anyone in education does, we introduce concepts and scaffold children's learning. So when we are talking about gender education, it's developmentally appropriate from, you know, the newborn, really, all the way up through, and I teach college now too, through that too, right? So there's all of the spectrum of where children are ready to learn certain concepts. So we do that by scaffolding and making it developmentally appropriate. The same way we wouldn't expect to introduce algebra in 9th grade with having never introduced any of those math fundamental concepts before. We want to be able to scaffold their learning and have it increase as they grow older and as their brains are able to process. And again, we don't question cisgender children about when they felt that they were straight or any of those things, in order to understand that some children don't think that they have to announce it, because cisgenders don't announce it either. So that's something that we need to be aware of with children in the not quite sure, you know, what to say and what to do. That's where gender education is really, really important. I know, I think Finn, you probably have some thoughts about, you know, as you were, when you were younger, and the things that you were told and not told. What do you think about how it is and how you got information?
I mean, I think for me, I really did not understand, and I was even given the freedom. I was sort of a tomboy by like 5th grade, but a lot of it was that it wasn't a big deal to me until then. It never, I mean, I certainly had instances like splitting into boys or girls where I'd feel very uncomfortable having to go into the girls line and things like that. But for me personally, I didn't think about it a ton, because I was just, you know, obviously not wearing a dress doesn't make you a girl. But when I did all that, that was all just dress up to me. Like it didn't make sense to me yet that those were things that made me be seen as a girl. I mean, I understood them, but, you know, from a gender standpoint, I had no idea what I was feeling wasn't normal.
Mm-hmm. That's really important. Really important. Thank you.
And I think too, the conversations, because we've had some conversations leading up to today, and I, you know, the specific one that always stands out for me is, you know, when Harper was in preschool and, you know, showing up to pick her up from preschool, and she would be decked out in this purple lace satin dress with pearls and these, I remember them so specifically, but there are these glasses that were like the 1950s that, you know, curled up in the corners, and she had the clickety clack high heels on. And I was like, okay, honey, it's time to go home. Let's take the dress up clothes off. And she looked at me like I had 2 heads. Like, no, this is what I'm wearing. And this was at the age of 2, you know, 3. No, this was not dress up for her. This was her expression. So there's certain ways, it may not always be the words that we have, but the expressions that we have definitely help tell the story or pave the narrative.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I definitely get that, because it's, kids know, you understand how you're seen by other things, and you always see girls in like princesses and dresses and all that. And I didn't understand in like 3rd grade when I wanted to get my hair cut short. I understood what that meant. I understood it made people mistake me for a boy more. And even if I didn't have the words, I understood my own sense of gender internally. And that was to be seen as more masculine than feminine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Ready to go to the next one?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Finn.
Yes, thank you, Finn. Children will become gay or trans if they are exposed to these topics. How do we feel?
Well, Megan, to me, this is the easiest myth to dispel. It really is. first and foremost, we have to understand that this myth is also from the idea that gender is freely chosen and not a scientific category. So when we push that aside, then we understand that, of course, there's no way that children will become gay or trans if they're exposed to these topics. Being near a gay person does not make you gay. It is in no way scientifically. I went through a lot of studies, and I mean thousands and thousands and thousands of people have been studied, and it was never anything that someone felt that they caught from being around someone else or anything like that. So, and I also like to point out that, you know, children don't choose to, you know, have the social stigma of being gay or trans or having to explain it to other people or know that they're going to be bullied or understand that they may be different. And so it's always interesting to me to hear that people think that a child will become or just choose when that's a really hard choice. And from what a lot of people that I've spoken to, that wasn't easy to explain to others and to fit in at school and all of those things. And so, you know, most people or all people really don't put themselves in the position of saying, I'm going to put myself in a position to be hurt on purpose. So I think that it's really important to understand that people are born the way that they're born. And so it's not chosen, therefore you cannot become gay or trans. So
Yeah,
I
think it also comes to a thing where people think that being trans is trendy for some reason. I'm not sure where that came from, but I can assure you that kids understand that, Adria, like you were saying, anything that makes you different it's a threat to you socially. You know, kids are they'll find anything to make fun of, or they're terrible. It's not anything trendy. And I think when we're talking about gender education, it's not trying to make it trendy. It's trying to make it so that kids won't be bullied for it, you know, so that kids can possibly have words for what they're feeling, and that cisgender and heterosexual kids can, you know, they won't see them as such outsiders, you know.
And giving them a safe space, you know, to have those kinds of conversations and ask those questions. And that's why I think it's so important that, you know, if you create these spaces on these elementary campuses and have teachers that are trained in this and staff and, you know, anyone and everyone, and have books on the shelves that kids can look through, you know, maybe you avoid some of those awkward. I mean, it's all going to be awkward. Let's be real. I mean, youth is awkward, but I mean, you know, it kind of eliminates some of that in that regard, to be able to say, give them the opportunity to express and figure out and explore. And that doesn't mean that someone's going to become a certain way because they're exploring and learning about it. If anything, it'll make them a better ally down the road if they are cishet. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that, yeah, as you said, Adria, this is probably the easiest one to dispel, just for that reason in itself.
We had to have one easy one.
Huh?
Good, one easy one.
Yeah, one easy one. Okay, here's our next one. Myth number 4. Okay. This is just a phase.
Oh, yeah. This is one that is a very common myth. The interesting part about this is that with young children, saying it's a phase is twofold. So what if it's a phase is what I say first. When we're talking about younger children, trying to understand who they are, trying to understand the people around them, it's very, very common that role play is how children work out the social structures around them. And so we always see, you know, the play that goes into being either a boy or a girl. Their understanding in their own world is that I can engage in play. That's not exactly who I am. So when we see people that a girl is dressed up, I say girl, dressed up like a boy, or engage in that play, they do some things that are there because society views this as gender typical, and that's fine. But when we see it in the opposite way, then people always tend to think that I don't want them, playing with certain toys or being with certain people or certain things, because they will again become gay. So it goes back to the myth 3. But being a phase is also the fact that play is always mimicking what children see around them. And so when we see them playing in things that are gender conforming, we assume that this is indicative of their actual gender identity. And that is where we are amiss, obviously. Children play like they're firefighters, and we're not going to send them out to, put out fire because they put on the outfit. So we need to be open and understanding that all children role play, all children try to decipher and understand what gender roles even are and what they aren't. Also, we have to understand that those things, when we have boys who are playing with dolls, that it may not have anything to do with gender at all. It may have to do with the fact that they want to be like their parent and they're parenting their dolls. The idea of those types of things and those toys that go back and forth really, when they're young, are very normal for those things to be happening. So the part 2 of this is to understand what a phase isn't. So a phase is when children, for a period of at least 6 months, show signs and say things like they really want to be they really are a girl, even if they have the physical traits of a boy. They strongly prefer friends of the gender in which they identify. They reject clothes, toys, typical games that are gender stereotyped, maybe refusing to urinate in a particular way, sitting or standing. Saying that they want to get rid of their genitals or wish they had the genitals of their true gender, believing that they are a girl or a boy, even if it doesn't match their assigned sex at birth. So a lot of these things are when those signs are prevalent for a minimum of 6 months. I think Megan said it best when she said it is consistent, persistent, and insistent. And that's when you know, okay, this is not just role play. This is a consistent, insistent, persistent part of my child or the child in my classroom that I'd like to understand more, right? So understanding what a phase is and what a phase isn't really gives you an idea that most children, I think only less than 1%, may go back and change after they begin to think that they are another gender, but it is not that it's very, very uncommon. So when we have children who are consistent, insistent, persistent for more than 6 months, they are telling you all you need to know as the grown-up for that person.
And I mean, I think that's part of the fear too. Like, what if it's a phase? What if this goes on for like years? And it's like, that's not a phase then.
Right.
Something's up if it's going on for more than 6 months. And I also think it's really important to mention, like, to let kids explore phases, to let them explore their expression, because that's how they work things out. Like, if you don't want your kid to make a mistake in their gender identity, which again, like you said, is really, really rare, especially when they like start to socially transition and stuff. But the way that you prevent that is by letting them explore, letting them wear what they want and do what they want. Because one, gender stereotypes suck and they have no meaning. And also, like I was saying, that's how you figure stuff out. I mean, my mom was talking with me yesterday about in sometime in elementary school, the first time she let me cut my hair short, and how I was just beaming and so happy. And at the time, she sort of was wondering, like, okay, is she a lesbian? Is like, she was very, confused with it, but she just let me explore it. And I'm grateful for that, which I still ended up not finding the words until later, but being able to explore that definitely helped me a lot and gave me more insight later to, oh, it's not normal. It's normal to, if you want short hair, but it wasn't normal for the reasons that I wanted it. I wanted to be seen as a boy. I liked being mistaken for a boy. And like Megan, you were saying with your daughter, with her wearing dresses and stuff, it's not that clothes or expression have some like magical gender power. It's just you understand how they make you, how you're seen, and how how things represented in media, how if you're a girl, you wear certain things, you know. I got a little off track, but you just got to let kids explore things.
And that's it. I think we live, you know, we've all talked about this and it's been said before, but we live very much in a heteronormative world. And therefore, it's the language that we were taught. It's the language that is still going to dominate in so many ways. And it's, you know, I think that the more that you know and the more that you understand, the less you fall into those heteronormative binary boxes, as I like to call them. You know, it may be something where you just need, it's like exactly, Finn, what you were saying, just explore who you are, explore, you know, like I hated Brussels sprouts as a kid. I love them now, but that was an exploration. It took me time to figure that out. And I'm not saying that that's what it is with gender. It's not, but it's just saying that there's these, you know, this broad opportunity here, and especially with little kids, instead of drilling it into their head that this is the way it has to be and this is who you are, just let them figure it out, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, and letting them just explore. So,
and I think, Megan, that goes back to people not understanding how smart kids are. They are so much smarter and their brains are working so much faster than we give them credit for, or probably even faster than ours do as adults. And they do work those things out in their mind, and they have to do it through play-based learning. It goes across everything. And so allowing them to do all types of exploration for who they are, not just within their gender, is an important support for children.
I agree. Okay, let's go on to our myth number 5. We should be gender blind.
So gender blind, and some of it have also probably heard of it when you say that you're colorblind. But gender blindness is when people disregard someone's gender. And so if it's not addressed and we are not being out and forthcoming with it, it's a way of being disrespectful to people in general. And it's not usually without good intention. When people say, oh, I don't see gender, I don't see color, it's usually from a good place. But we have to acknowledge that the way that someone's skin color or their ethnicity is important to them, someone's gender is equally as important to them as well. And it plays a large role in their life. So if we aren't willing to acknowledge it, then it's going to perpetuate all of that unconscious bias that people have, or the conscious where they, we don't want to talk about it. And then therefore it goes back and puts it on the child of, this is bad because people don't talk about it. And so we don't ever want that to be the messaging that we get across to children. So actually acknowledging and discussing it is more supportive, more helpful, and more teachable, has teachable moments. So gender blind is gender bias.
Yeah, and it's easy enough to really look at, when we're discussing kids and gender, to think, oh, there isn't a problem, whether that's in the sense for trans students or really just with gender roles and stereotypes in general. But we have to understand that what we have right now is not working. We're leaving kids without sources of like reliable and correct information, because what happens is we're left to the internet, and this is what confuses kids. This is how kids end up being bullied. Trans kids don't just appear out of thin air one day in like middle school or high school. These are things that some kids know very early and others work it out later, but it's always a part of us. And especially a lot of it comes down to, like we discussed in the earlier myths, of not wanting kids to be exposed to inappropriate things or sexual things. And unfortunately, LGBT people, especially trans people, have been sexualized a lot. If you don't want your kids to be exposed to inappropriate things, don't leave them with the internet as their only source of information. Because I can assure you, when trying to find stuff about trans people, you're going to find inappropriate stuff. That's not reflective of what being trans is, but that's the type of stuff that's out there.
And especially right now in the age of distance learning and remote learning. And I mean, pretty much for the most part, every child is working off of a laptop from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so you're seeing, you have much more of an opportunity to engage and start looking these things up. And I think that we have to prepare and educate and support our teachers, especially. You know, the story I always go back to was Harper's first day of kindergarten, where she had 2 other students in the class that knew her prior to transition and called her out in the classroom, which was an opportunity for a really great learning opportunity. And thankfully in our home, we've done, obviously we talk too much in our home, but we've had, you know, these really big conversations, and they had been to therapy, both of my girls had. And so Harper was prepared and said, we were wrong. I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, and my name's Harper, and this is who I am. And the teacher was just like, oh my gosh, you know. And so in any other case, especially when you have a sibling that's older or younger than you and you're at the same school together, and the transition takes place when you're at the same school together, that's why this is why it's so important, and why we have to have these conversations and prepare and support our teachers and staff so that they can have these, you know, proper tools and words and ways to help support their kids. So definitely can't be gender blind, gender bias. All right. So gender ed does not benefit cishet students. And if we go back just quickly, cishet means that you are cisgender and heterosexual.
Exactly. Okay, myth number 6, you know, this is one of those that there's been a lot of research done on as well. We know that the benefits, the research shows that children who have comprehensive health education, which includes gender education, there's just improved body image, better over interpersonal skills, improved media literacy, because as Finn was saying before, the importance of getting information from a good source versus what may become a bad source online. But when we give them the education, then they know what I'm looking up on the internet right now is not true, because they've been taught what is true. So that's a great thing, which goes across the board for media literacy. And it really does give that understanding of how media and society are playing into all these roles. And then all children that have gender education have a better sense of what it means maybe to be a kid, to be a teenager, all of those different things. And it really does open up the opportunity for vulnerability, because cishet students have vulnerabilities. They can relate to people not accepting them for whatever they think they aren't being accepted for, because with children, it's always something, right? There's always something, like Finn was saying, that they can find to make fun of you. So the more we educate the children, the more there's opportunity for teachable moments. And then it's a better school climate, more positive. Students feel safer. There's lower levels of homophobia and bullying. So it's really important that we educate our cishet students as well, so that everybody's included as well. Everybody's included in this education. Everybody benefits, for sure.
I think also, especially for gender nonconforming kids, so that being kids who, for example, a boy who might wear makeup or dresses, or girls who might wear more masculine clothes, which is unfortunately very one-sided in what's accepted. Though it's great that, you know, girls in masculine clothes is accepted, it's a little depressing that doesn't work the other way too. My point being that gender education also really helps gender nonconforming students, both in having them recognize the difference between gender expression and gender. Again, and coming back to not wanting kids to be confused, you have to give them the information. And also, I can really just speak from experience growing up with other LGBT students at schools, and hearing how cishet students would generally discuss them, you know, behind their backs. It was bad. It was really quite bad. It was because they didn't understand was what it came down to, or the information they did have was really, really bad. And it's just, it all comes down to education, and it doesn't hurt cis students at all to learn about this, and it makes a safer school for gender nonconforming and trans students.
Absolutely.
Yes, it does.
Very, very important. I think that I know that we have a couple of questions to answer, but I think that my final thought is really, no child should have to feel alone for any reason. that they should have love and support from all of their grown-ups. And when I say grown-ups, I mean their parents, extended family, anybody, but their teachers and the people that are in their schools. Those are their grown-ups. Those are the ones they look to for security. And so we as educators need to understand our role in where we are in that space. I went to a meeting, a training that I was in a few weeks ago, and a thing came up that I thought was really interesting. And he said, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. And I think that that's really important for all of our teachers to know, that we aren't expecting them to take on, the counseling services if a young child's, identifying as transgender. We're expecting them to be supportive and to help in their classroom and in their school situations. And so I just think that it's really important that we as the grown-ups in the lives of children do everything we can to advocate that they are also given the opportunities for success in their life to be happy.
Yeah, totally. I also think I wanted to comment that I do think a lot of these myths, especially ones about contagion or things, I think a lot of it does come from a place of parents being scared that their kid is actually trans, because a lot of how it's represented and is that, it's a life of misery, and so many less people are going to want to date you, and you're going to be harassed or even assaulted. And it's like, these are realities to an extent. I mean, trans people do face a lot of problems, but it's often overrepresented, though of course it is still an issue. And what it really comes down to is you can't hold your kids back from being themselves, whether they're just gender nonconforming or they're trans. You can avoid harassment, you can prevent bullying. If you're trapping your kid in a life that isn't theirs to lead, there's no way to avoid that. It's a constant struggle. You go ahead. You just gotta, if they are trans, then they'll work it out. You just have to let them explore, and you can recognize the issues that they might face if they are trans, while understanding that that's so much better. I mean, we see it in the suicide rates and mental health issues. You have to let them be themselves.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think the best thing that you can do, if you do have a child that you're questioning, they're questioning, you can't just leave it for them to have to figure it out on their own or do the work themselves. You as a parent and an ally, obviously, you'll be so much more of a support to these kids the more that you know yourself. And I think that, for my final thoughts before we go to Q&A, and Finn, if you have anything more, please feel free to say, too, that no matter where you're at, you're valid, you matter, you're loved. Those are the most important things to know. And if there are others that may not be affirming, please know that there are so many of us that are, and that there are safe spaces and safe people to talk to. And know that no matter what.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything else? Are you good?
I'm not sure if I should or if we're allowed to say this, but if anyone is questioning or they're a parent that needs support or places to get support, that they can always reach out to Unity Conejo.
Yes, we have our, and we will show the slide. I'm gonna stop screen sharing here for a second so that I can go through some questions, and then at the very end, before we close out, I'll put the slide up that has all of the information for our social media, which we can send to you as well. And so let me go ahead and stop sharing. Okay. So our first question, yeah?
Okay.
You have a question? Something
No,
happened?
I said, throw me a question.
Okay, here's the first one. So the first question is, how do we open up play areas to avoid gender roles? Girls play kitchen, house, boys, blocks and trucks, sports for girls and boys, just the sports. How do we break that up?
Yeah, so first of all, in classrooms, that happens all the time. Everything is, this is for boys, this is for girls, which is, we've got to throw that out the window, right? I know that a lot of people were talking about previously, like in the girls' playhouse, and that's the dramatic play area. So in education, we don't say it's the house area, and it used to be called like housekeeping, but that's a very antiquated term. This is dramatic play, and so it shouldn't always be the house. It should be a restaurant, and it should be a Starbucks or a post office or a fire station. It can really be anything that allows children to go into that area to want to play. Because it's very interesting how when we have girls in the kitchen who are cooking, they're the mommies, and that it's women's work, or that type of thing. But suddenly when it becomes a restaurant and the boys are chefs and they're cooking, it's a very different scenario, right? So because now we've got different role models for people who are chefs. So it's not just that women cook anymore. Now our children get to see that there are a lot of men who are chefs too. So opening up the opportunity for them to understand that cooking is not for one gender or another, and giving them the opportunity and the exposure to images, stories, and opportunity. So also in those areas, there tends to be dresses and an apron, and then of the uniforms, the firefighter outfit, the police officer outfit, or something like that. But we need to make sure that we're putting in, clip-on ties and shoes and blazers, and because we may have girls who want to put those things on as part of their role play as well. And so let's not just kind of give it this definitive, this is what it's supposed to be. I always say that in the classroom, it's important too to stop saying, okay, boys and girls. And it's a really hard habit to break for those of us that have worked with young children for a long time, because it was one of those things that was, put into us too. When we're trying to get the attention of our class, we say boys and girls. Instead of, okay, my friends, or okay, students in room 5, or, something else. So not labeling children in that sense as well. I think it's really important with books and materials that we put out for children, that they are exposing, not that your library becomes dominated by, transgender or same-sex families or anything like that. It's just that within all of the things that you're teaching, these types of concepts should just be intertwined. And so we have images that children are seeing that are non-gender stereotypical. The woman who's the truck driver, who does look more masculine. We don't know how the person in the poster identifies, but we know that maybe I feel like I want to drive a truck, but I've been told that's only a boy thing. So let's give them the imagery to also show them that there are other things that they can be doing. With the block area and things like that, I say it's the same thing. We have to make sure that the other materials that we're putting into those areas just open up the opportunity for what they're playing. So we always tend to say the boys are playing with cars, and that the girls don't want to. I think that people would be surprised. Girls want to drive. They see people driving all the time too. And remember that for them, a lot of those things aren't about just boy or girl roles. It's a grown-up role. And so they want to be grown up. Therefore, they want to dress like they're going to work, carry their briefcase, drive the car, go to the grocery store. This is where they are really understanding what their roles are. So we just need to give them those opportunities and change what we're expecting to happen in certain areas. And then having them, line up at the door by who's wearing green, not who's a girl and who's a boy, and not saying, certain things that have to, this is the boy table or this is the girl table. Or even when we're doing graphing with children in class, there's often times where you see like the big poster on the wall where they've graphed who likes pepperoni on their pizza. Oftentimes it's done by gender. All the pink blocks are the ones that like pepperoni, or the blue ones. So we just need to get away from understanding that we're doing those things kind of unconsciously, and really move towards not doing those types of things in a classroom. Because, like I said, we don't expect teachers to be identifying, but certainly as a support. And with anything, for teachers to be out there saying, I'm going to give the children in my classroom the opportunity to explore everything. The same, we have, art, and we have science, and we have all those things. I believe we've come to a place more so in our society where we know, oh, girls can do math. but that wasn't always like that. And so somebody had to, change the narrative on that and make it so that it wasn't stereotypical, so that now with our young children, it's anybody can do math, anybody can cook, anybody can drive, and understanding that we need to look at it as a group of people
Mhm.
and not just the two boxes that we've been told that they fit into, because they don't fit into those two boxes.
And these are things that benefit all students too. I was talking the other day, and really just how we, with my mom, how when she thinks of doctors, she'll immediately think of men, for example. And that's just not how it is, and that's a pretty bad precedent set. But and this is where it starts. It's growing up in classrooms, and what we see, and the way that we prevent these stereotypes from being ingrained in kids' minds as they grow up is by gender inclusive education.
Mhm.
It's also the little things you don't always think about too. I mean, prime example, things that I never would have thought about, but Harper being as young as she was in kindergarten is when they do the colorblindness testing in kindergarten, and they only colorblind test the boys because they have a higher percentage of positive colorblindness in boys. And so because we are obviously so open and we're so Harper introduces herself this way, our school knows. And so I got a phone call and, hey, listen, do you want Harper to be tested for colorblindness? Which triggered me to think, what, this should not be binary. We should be doing an opt-in or an opt-out for colorblindness testing. Maybe there's females that want to get, we should just, send a letter home and say, yes, please check my kid for colorblindness, or no, I don't, there's ways to go about it. But at the same time, we have to learn these things as we go ahead too, because these are all things that we don't always think about.
Absolutely. And we won't always think, but when something like that comes up, it certainly is the opportunity for us, especially those in education, to say, where are we missing the mark? What can we do so that we're not alienating a population of people? And especially at this time when so much more information and knowledge is coming out, and people are becoming more able to talk about these things and freely are talking about these things, it really is a teachable shift that we could be making for the next generation of children that grow up with these things already having been taken place, because people like you, Megan, forge through to make change for the next. So change starts somewhere.
It has to. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. We did have a couple that came through, but like I said, we'll address those after the fact. But I do want to get to this one because I think that it's very valid to ask. Someone said, as a first grade teacher, I'm unsure of my role and I'm concerned about backlash from conservative parents.
I think that the backlash is concerning. And I think that typically we as educators get backlash on numerous things. And it's usually because there's not correct information out. So I think that, of course, explaining the ways that we're changing our ways is not lining up by gender, things like that. Because a first grade teacher, those are the things that we just talked about, right? A first grade teacher with the lining up, allowing images. Those are the things that we do as teachers. So that's the role. And the role is to be supportive of the children. I wish I had an answer about parents' backlash, but honestly, my first thought is to say that the students take precedent over any type of backlash, and that we need to do what's best by children and by all children all the time. And it's not perfect, but that's where our foundation should lie. And I think that if parents are fighting against these things at this young age, it certainly is because they probably don't understand the depth of what gender education is, and that the sex piece is not involved, and we're not teaching about those types of concepts. Because I do agree that most parents would say they want their children to grow up in a world that is peaceful, where people get along and people don't hurt other people based on their differences. And so that's where I would challenge that and say, we're trying to have nice humans that are accepting humans.
Yeah, like Adria said, there's a lot of things that especially if you think you'll end up with backlash, which a lot of it is, unfortunately, things just might happen regardless. But a lot of it comes down to what you don't do, like splitting kids up by gender and only presenting like, stuff where girls are shown in the kitchen, for example. There's a lot of ways that you can just not do things, because it's a lot. It's not like a parent, I'd hope not, will come to you and be like, you didn't split up the kids into boys and girls.
Right. But as a teacher, our job is to know that those things are not what we should be doing in a classroom anymore. And so I don't expect parents to know everything that all of the teachers do. That is their expertise. That is what they've chosen for their careers. They have education and training. So there's a part of that that's also saying we need to trust our educators and train them properly and all of those things, so that they can have those conversations that best help all of the students in an appropriate, of course, manner.
Yeah, age appropriate, as we've said too. I think it's really important to emphasize that, because there's you don't want to confuse them. You just want to help guide them and give them language, and there's easy ways to do that. There's plenty of opportunities.
Sometimes it's having resources for parents.
Absolutely. Totally.
We're not expecting teachers to be transgender experts by any means, but at least supportive enough to say, here's some resources. How can I help you? And how can I partner with you as your child's teacher to help you through your process?
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share our screen that has our, let's see here. I am screen sharing. Oh, am I? Supposed to be on this, and now it's supposed to be on present. There we go. Let me get here to the end where we have our information on how to contact us through all of our different social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we are on Facebook and Twitter, and then at the bottom is also our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel houses our last 2 town halls that we have, as well as this one, which will go up sometime this week. And also, as I said before, includes our LGBT plus Joy is Real series that just got started. There's 1 episode uploaded there so far. It's really great. And yeah, so to put it out there as well, our next town hall that we will be having is in May, and we are going to talk about how to be an ally. And I think that there's probably also some misconceptions around being an ally. Being affirming is wonderful, and we need more affirming people in this world as a whole. But as far as how to be an ally, you really do need to put in the work. You need to learn and understand and educate yourself and understand why it's so important to be an ally. And so
Megan,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You need to share your screen, double click. We can't see.
Oh.
Well, I thought that was just my screen.
Oh, it says that it's screen sharing.
Yeah, it's not showing the social media tags.
That's so weird. Let's try this. No? Okay. Well, that's a bummer. That's a huge bummer. Hang on. This is what I'm saying, technical difficulties. This is just, what happens. What a bummer. And now I've lost.
We'll send them in the follow-up.
Yeah, we'll send them in the follow-up to all of you. And we'll send that slide that was so pretty. And now it's not showing up. Again, so please reach out to us at any time to, ask questions. And if you think of anything after the fact, and then we do have some questions we didn't have time to get to. So we will work on those and get those out to you, along with the terminology and some resources as well. And I thank you again for spending your Sunday with us. And we will keep you posted on the next one coming up here in May.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody.